Perhaps by the time this video reaches you, the race has already ended. However, regardless of the outcome, I want to share something with you. Under President Biden, America has made a major mistake, and only Trump, not Harris, who is likely to carry on Biden's legacy, is capable of pulling the country out of the current chaos. Getting involved in the conflict in Gaza or the tension in Ukraine are some of the most serious missteps America has made. This video will analyze why we need to reconsider and counter the Western media's ongoing message that Ukraine will achieve a complete victory, reclaiming all of its territory, including Crimea, a region that has identified as part of Russia for decades. Those with a clear mind can see that the goal of total victory was never truly achievable. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, who dared to speak the uncomfortable truth in the European Parliament, has acknowledged this. As the rotating president of the Council of the European Union, Orbán has used his position to call for peace. Despite opposition from many EU leaders, he remains resolute. Orbán, often labeled as Putin's friend, criticizes the EU's sanctions on Russia, arguing that these measures don't help but rather backfire on the EU. Meanwhile, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, an American economist, has pointed out that the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is essentially a proxy war, with the United States as the primary beneficiary. The sad reality is that this conflict has lasted for decades, a consequence of NATO's eastward expansion, edging closer to Russia's borders, crossing the red lines that Russia has repeatedly warned about. As Sachs noted, NATO's presence close to Russia is unnecessary, and there is no justification for this. Western media wants people to believe that Russia attacked Ukraine unprovoked, but the truth is that the United States has played a critical role in pushing Ukraine into this confrontation. Looking back at history, many prominent American figures have warned about the consequences of NATO expansion. Former U.S. Ambassador to the Soviet Union George Kennan, the architect of the containment strategy during the Cold War, strongly opposed NATO expansion, calling it an unjustified mistake and stating that this decision would make the founding fathers of the United States turn in their graves. Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State and political advisor, also warned that Ukraine should not join NATO to avoid provoking Russia. However, despite these warnings, in 1998, the U.S. Senate approved NATO's expansion. At that time, former secretaries of state and notable diplomats sent an open letter to President Bill Clinton, warning that NATO expansion would weaken European security, but their advice was ignored. This expansion of NATO ultimately led to today's heightened tensions, culminating in the war in Ukraine. The United States has repeatedly applied double standards. For example, during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s, the U.S. declared that Soviet missiles were not allowed in the Western Hemisphere. Yet the U.S. stationed missiles capable of threatening Moscow directly in Turkey. In response, the Soviet Union wanted to do the same in Cuba, a move the U.S. could not accept. The world was then on the brink of destruction, and only the wisdom of leaders averted disaster. For Russia, their red line is that Ukraine should not join NATO. But America ignored this warning, continued pushing NATO expansion, and intervened in Ukraine. The result is an escalating conflict, dragging the world into a spiral of tension. So, what is America's motivation? It could be corruption, politics, immense profits from the military-industrial complex, or the belief in a hegemonic mission that the United States has long wanted to maintain. America refuses to accept that it is no longer the sole superpower, and any threat to its dominance is deemed unacceptable. Now, with the prospect of President Biden's term ending and Trump's return with a commitment to end the Ukraine conflict, is there hope for a resolution to this pointless war? Is America truly ready to face reality and change, when billions of dollars have been wasted and thousands of lives lost just to protect its supremacy? Perhaps it is time for Washington to look in the mirror and reflect on the consequences of its policies.